friends, why are you here this morning? Did you listen to the scripture? Is it because you hate your mother and your father and your children? Because you hate your life? Is that why? Not for me either. No. Let's admit it, Jesus made some really strange comments. This scripture for today is one of those times. Do we really need to hate our mother, our father, our children in order to be Christians? Aren't Christians supposed to support family values? Do we really need to hate our own lives in order to be good followers of Jesus? Aren't we supposed to promote, as the Bible promotes, as God promotes, abundant life? What are we dealing with here? How are we to understand these strange words from this strange rabbi, Jesus? I think it begins as we look at the context. The passage starts out by saying large crowds were traveling with Jesus. This itinerant rabbi has become popular. But kind of like a rock star, the groupies have begun to gather. They'd heard about his preaching and his teaching. They especially heard about his miracles. And they wanted to get close to this incredible, charismatic man to experience the unusual energy that seemed to surround him. Some of the more serious ones, no doubt, thought that perhaps this really was the Messiah that the nation had been longing for, the one who would deliver them all from the hand of the Roman legions. But Jesus was less than encouraging to them. He told them that there's more to this disciple business than meets the eye. You see, at this point in this story, Jesus knows where he is headed. He's on his way to his death, on his way to Jerusalem, and he sees this great multitude of people who are following him, and he has compassion on them. The multitude followed him, and because he cared about them, he thought it was appropriate to remind them of what would be required for any one of them to really become one of his disciples. And so he told them very clearly, if anyone comes to me and does not hate their own father and mother and spouse and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even their own life, they cannot be my disciple. Wow. Jesus is trying to give these well-intentioned people who were probably singing that song we just sang, I have decided to follow Jesus. He wants to give them the real picture of what it meant to be a disciple. It was a warning so that they could count the cost before volunteering for discipleship. As Spurgeon said, Jesus did not wish to win disciples by mistake. He was trying to do them a favor. He suggested that they go home and do some serious thinking about whether or not they were ready for this big a commitment. To tell you the truth, I suspect many who heard him that day were as puzzled by what he said as you and I are. What is all this about hating parents, children, even our own lives? You know, every time I do a funeral service and I come to the words in John 12, verses 24 to 26, I struggle. Sometimes I just want to leave it out. Because the wording is so strange to us. Jesus says, those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it until life eternal. We say those words, and then we go on and say the wonderful things about how the person who passed loved life in this world and how they were loved. How does that fit together? And so I just want to leave it out.
Amen.
I'm confused by those words, hate their life in this world. The best way, I think, to understand it is to realize that when Jesus used the word hate, the one that we translate as hate, he was using a figure of speech that we really don't quite use anymore. In Aramaic, the word that we translate hate, miseo, has nothing to do with feelings. It does not mean anger or hostility. It's a way of expressing priorities. If I say, I love the Red Sox and hate the Yankees, doesn't really mean I hate them. I don't even don't know them well enough to hate them. But I definitely had a preference, a priority. First choice. In Jesus' day, the way that you stated a preference was by pairing two things and saying you loved one and hated the other. So it really doesn't have anything to do with feelings. The issue is priorities. To what have you made a prior commitment that stands over and above any other commitments? Think about it. I've made a prior commitment to my marriage, and so I hate the idea of being unfaithful. That's my prior commitment. I've made a prior commitment to donate to the church, to give money, and so I choose not to gamble my money away. Prior commitment that stands in the way as you make a decision. That prior commitment helps you to make that decision. Jesus was saying that if there's a conflict, the response to the demands of discipleship must take precedence over even the most sacred of human relationships. When there's a conflict between what you need to do for Christ and your father or mother or sister or brother, prior commitment to Christ takes priority. He's reminding us that our prior commitment is to God, that all other commitments come second. I suspect as Jesus looked around the multitude, that there were some people who probably took him at his word and began to think seriously about what it really would mean to be a disciple. For example, perhaps one woman sat for a long time thinking about what Jesus had said concerning hating your spouse and your children. She was happily married. She was the mother of 2 sons and 2 daughters whom she loved very much. She had not bargained for such a high cost to discipleship. She knew she could not walk away from her husband or sever her relationships with her children. She loved them too much. Indeed, at times she loved them more than she loved Jesus. She was aware that Jesus was talking directly to her, and she was not ready to be Jesus' disciple, to take up a cross and follow him to Jerusalem. Maybe there was a youth in the multitude who had just completed his apprenticeship as a carpenter. For months and months he had labored in his uncle's carpenter shop, learning the trade. And now it was time for him to be a carpenter. His days of preparation were past. He had paid the price. And now he was excited about putting this skill to work. He knew he would not turn his back on all of this to become a disciple of Jesus. From that moment, he knew that his service to this traveling preacher would be limited by his work as a carpenter. Possibly an older man heard the warnings and did not try to play tricks on himself. First to thine own self be true, he thought. He knew himself and his fear of pain and of suffering. He didn't want to hear of any requirement that included taking up a cross, carrying a cross, laying down his life. He did not want to hear of anything that would cause the shedding of his blood. He wanted to follow this Jesus. He wanted to learn from him, but he did not want to suffer pain for him. Most of us can understand this because in some ways we are like these people, or at least I am like them. When I hear these difficult words of Jesus, I know that I'm not ready to be a disciple in the way that Jesus is asking his closest disciples to be at this particular time in his journey. I'm not ready to renounce all in order to follow Jesus. I definitely will give my life to following Jesus, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to give up other things. I have a husband who I love. I have children and grandchildren who I deeply care about. I'm not ready, willing, able to walk away from them. I have possessions that I'm not ready to surrender. In fact, I remember telling God that when I accepted the call finally to ministry, that I would go wherever I was sent as long as I had a dishwasher.
Good. Has it worked out? Has it worked out?
So far, so far. There were times when Bob stood in as the dishwasher. dishwasher, but most of the time we had the other one. Last night I went to my second 50th high school reunion, this one for Concord Carlisle Regional High School. It was at the Weston in Waltham. I talked with some of my classmates. Some of them continue to live in Concord or nearby Concord for those whole 50 years. Unbelievable. I thought about what my life might have been like if I had lived in just one place for most of my life. Very different. Sometimes I'm envious of that kind of life, as opposed to this itinerant life, this ministry where I go from place to place at the will of the bishop. I have not yet been sent to some place I didn't enjoy, but it's a whole different experience from being somewhere where you know everyone because you've been there for so long. I thought a lot about what I've given up in order to follow Jesus, taking the cost of discipleship into account. I know there's a big difference between the disciple St. Francis and me. He literally gave up everything, in order to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And there's a big distance between Mother Teresa and me. When I read her biography, I marvel at her total commitment to our Lord. She took up her cross daily to serve God. He was first in her life. The demands outlined in this part of the 14th chapter of Luke's Gospel help us to understand how high the cost of discipleship can be. Indeed, for some of us, discipleship might mean leaving hearth and home for service somewhere on the other side of the globe, or even on the other side of New England. It could mean a ministry in a dangerous neighborhood of an inner city. It could mean participating in a work trip to rural Maine or to Nicaragua to help Christian brothers and sisters who have only limited resources. It could mean getting up early on a Saturday morning to come and help with cleanup at your church. It could mean helping out on a Monday night at Bristol Lodge to serve meals to the hungry. It could mean something as simple as making certain that you are here for worship on Sunday and Bible study on Tuesday or week to week, because you know that the Greek word that we translate disciple really means learner. Being a disciple makes a difference in the way we live. Our commitment to God comes before any other commitment, any other relationship. It's a prior commitment. One of our generation's greatest preachers, Fred Craddock, preached at my graduation from Bangor Theological Seminary when I got my doctorate in ministry. He told a story from his early years in Custer City, Oklahoma, when he was early in ministry. It was a town of about 450 people. There were 4 churches there: a Mennonite church, a Methodist church, a Nazarene church, a Baptist church. He served one of those churches. Each had its share of the population on Wednesday night, and Sunday morning, and Sunday evening. Each had a small collection of young people. And the attendance rose and fell according to the weather and whether it was time to harvest the wheat. But the most consistent attendance in town was at the little cafe where all the pickup trucks were parked. And all the men were inside discussing the weather and the cattle and the wheat bugs and the hail and the wind and whether there was going to be a crop this year. All their wives and sons and daughters were in one of those 4 churches. And the churches had good attendance and poor attendance, but the cafe had consistently good attendance, better attendance than some of those churches. They were always there. They were not bad men. They were good men, family men, hardworking men. Fred says the patron saint of that group was named Frank. Frank was 77 when he first met Fred. He was a good, strong man, a pioneer, a rancher, and a farmer. He was a prospering cattleman, too. He had been born in a sod house. That's S-O-D, sod, not S-A-W-E-D. Sod house. He had his credentials, and all the men there at the cafe considered him their patron saint. Ha! Old Frank will never go to church, they said. Fred says, I met Frank on the street one time. He knew I was a preacher, but it has never been my custom to accost people in the name of Jesus. So I was just shaking his hand and visiting with him. But he took the offensive. He said, I work hard, I take care of my family, and I mind my own business. As far as I'm concerned, everything else is fluff. See what he told me? Says Fred. Yes, Fred. Leave me alone, he said. I'm not a prospect. So Fred said, I didn't bother Frank. And then Fred Craddock went on to say, as he told his story, that's why the entire church and the whole town were surprised, and the men at the cafe church were absolutely more bumfuzzled, he says, when old Frank, at 77 years old, presented himself before me one Sunday morning for baptism. I baptized Frank. Some of the talk in the community was this: Frank must be sick. Guess he's scared to meet his maker. They say he's got heart trouble. Going up there and being baptized, well, I never thought old Frank would do that, but I guess when you get scared, all kinds of stories that they made up. But Dr. Craddock goes on, we were talking the next day after his baptism, and I said, Frank, remember that old little saying you used to give me so often? I work hard, I take care of my family, I mind my own business. He said, yeah, I remember. I said that a lot. I said, you still say that? He said, yeah. I said, well, then what's the difference? And Frank said, I didn't know then what my business was. I hope you are here this morning because you know what your business is. I hope that your priorities are straight. And if they are not, and you know they are not, but you want them to be, then I hope that's why you were here this morning. We have all come to the right place at the right time. The danger of discipleship? It's simple. It changes you. Suddenly you see the world through new eyes, the eyes of Jesus. You see needs and you want to fill them. You see hurts and you want to heal them. The danger of discipleship is it changes you, and it keeps on changing you, and keeps on changing you for now and always.